I had been in this world for exactly 3 months. Every time I saw my father in this life sitting there counting money, my mother buying things like there was no tomorrow, and gold bars piled all over the house, I couldn't force even the slightest smile. Seriously, it wasn't that I didn't want to laugh. I simply couldn't. This new era had only just begun. If history unfolded the way I remembered from my previous life, wealthy families like ours would soon become the government's #1 enemies. In a few years, our entire family would be driven out of here and dumped in the desolate Northwest to suffer. So I didn't hide anything. I told my parents exactly what was going to happen. In a few years, the fact that we're rich will become our greatest crime. Today we can still live openly as a wealthy family, but a few years from now, people will be chasing us through the streets. The expensive timber, the antiques, even this mansion covering several thousand square meters, none of it is really our wealth. It's a noose around our necks. After hearing me, my mother, Guan Wanli, went deathly pale. She crushed the silk handkerchief in her hand without even realizing it. Her voice trembled. Chun Chun, don't say things like that. Just yesterday, an officer from the army praised your father for donating so many winter coats to the troops. The other wealthy families around us donated too, didn't they? Why would they come after our family in particular? I let out a long breath. Mom, the people praising us today won't necessarily be praising us tomorrow. Once land starts being redistributed to farmers and factories start being taken over, do you really think donating a few coats will protect us? When that happens, we'll be like sheep on a butcher's block. Anyone who wants a piece of us will be able to cut one off. I paused and turned toward my father. The rich families nearby who are preparing to flee the country aren't completely wrong. They're just moving too fast. If we run now, we'll have to sell every business and property we own for next to nothing. And once we reach a place where we know no one and understand nothing, if somebody decides to bully us, we won't even have the means to fight back. We can't gamble the whole family's lives like that. My father, Louis Han, stubbed out the cigar in his hand. He looked at me. It was no longer the look a father gave a child. It was the look of a veteran player studying an equally calculating opponent across a chessboard. Then what's your plan? I met his eyes and said each word clearly. Go to the northeast. My father immediately frowned. It's even more chaotic there than it is here. Bandits and thugs are everywhere. I cut him off at once. That's exactly why there's an opportunity. The Northeast is vast and sparsely populated. We find some forgotten corner, buy a few rundown houses, and change our identities. We shed the skin of rich people and become farmers. As long as the three of us stay together, as long as we have ration coupons and can get food, we can survive. I sounded firm, but if I was being truthful, my heart was pounding. This was the best plan I could come up with based on the historical material I had read in my previous life. But to people of this era, asking someone with an enormous fortune to willingly give it all up sounded no different from insanity. My father was silent for a long time. Then, suddenly, he threw back his head and laughed. That old Taoist priest really was right all those years ago. My son is a born strategist. He turned to my mother. Wanli, we'll do what Chun Chun says. My father walked to the desk and yanked open a drawer. Smack! He slapped a brown pistol down on the desktop. My mother flinched all over. My father spoke in a low voice. The truth is, business has been getting harder and harder lately. The tax people show up every day. And the labor unions are constantly causing trouble too. I knew the wind had changed a long time ago. I just couldn't bear to let go of everything I'd built. So I kept trapping myself in it. Now that our son has said out loud what none of us wanted to admit, we might as well make one big bet. As long as we're alive, we can always rebuild. If this family stays safe, then even if I have to plow fields with my own hands, I, Louis Han, can build another fortune from nothing. After saying that, he looked at me again, as if deliberately testing me. He asked, but what do we do with everything in this house? If we put it all on the market, it'll attract an investigation almost immediately. I understood at once. Dad was testing me. The brain I brought from my previous life, trained by a modern world's endless flood of information, immediately kicked into high gear. I held up 3 fingers. First, we create a public distraction while making our real move in secret. We tell everyone mom is in poor health and needs to travel elsewhere for treatment. Second, for the businesses and properties we can't take with us, we deliberately sell them cheap to our greedy rivals. Let them fight over the bargains while we convert everything into portable assets. Third, we exchange as much cash as possible for gold, silver, dollars, Grain, cotton cloth, and penicillin. Once real chaos begins, medicine can be worth even more than gold. My father kept nodding as he listened. The look in his eyes had changed completely. For the first time, he clearly realized that the son who had once caused him endless worry might now be the one thing capable of saving the entire Liu family. Good. We'll do exactly that. My father slammed a palm on the desk so hard the teacups jumped. Wanli, don't just stand there. Get the key to the safe. Tonight, we'll go through every account. Sort out whatever we can take. As for what we can't, my mother clenched her teeth. Of course it hurt to give up things worth fortunes, but she had clearly made up her mind too. Anything we truly can't take, I'd rather smash with my own hands. I won't leave it for those ungrateful vultures. Only then did I finally breathe a little easier. My clothes were already soaked with cold sweat down my back. At least we'd cleared the first hurdle. As long as my parents were willing to cooperate, we still had a chance of escaping this alive. Once the plan was settled, my parents moved immediately. My father began quietly contacting people outside to dispose of our land and businesses. My mother started sorting the household's grain, gold, and jewelry. I returned to my room, but I couldn't calm down. There was simply too much stuff in this house. Even if we sold half of it, how could we possibly move the rest to the northeast without anyone noticing? If only I had one of those personal storage spaces from web novels. The thought had barely crossed my mind when my fingers brushed the white jade pendant hanging around my neck. Somehow, this pendant had followed me from my previous life. Wait, if this followed the logic of those novels, could this thing actually be some kind of magical storage artifact? It cost nothing to try. And what if I got lucky? I took a needle from the sewing box and jabbed it hard into my fingertip. A drop of blood fell onto the jade pendant. The next second, the drop vanished straight into it. Not even a stain remained. Then a sensation like an electric current shot from my finger straight into my brain. My head buzzed. The world spun around me. A second later, I found myself standing in an incredibly familiar luxurious courtyard. Artificial rock formations. A pond. A beautiful residence. The whole place looked like a scaled-down copy of my family home. And the air seemed to contain some strange energy that made my entire body feel instantly refreshed. My eyes stung with tears. With a place like this, I could do more than save my parents. I could build an absolutely secure haven for my family before the coming years of severe material shortages. But after looking around more carefully, I quickly noticed something strange. It was too quiet. No wind, no insects. Everything seemed frozen in place. I plucked a leaf from a branch. Even after leaving the tree, it stayed green and fresh. The analytical part of my brain immediately switched on. Time was stopped. If time was completely frozen here, then wouldn't anything I stored inside remain fresh forever? No way. This was basically an infinitely large super refrigerator. I immediately pushed open an iron door in the middle of the garden. The heavy door opened without a sound. A faint light came on inside. Then I froze in disbelief. This was no ordinary storage room. It looked more like an enormous modern logistics warehouse. Rows of metal shelving, 3 or 4 stories high, stretched so far I couldn't see the end. Forget the contents of our house. It felt as though I could move an entire city's goods inside and still not fill one corner. Unlimited space. Supplies that never spoiled. My breathing quickened. I had to test it. If this really worked the way I thought, then during the shortages to come, this space would become our family's ultimate trump card. With a thought, I reappeared in my bedroom in the real world. I picked up the teacup on my desk. In. Whoosh. The teacup vanished. Out. The teacup dropped back onto the desk. The tea inside hadn't even rippled. It worked. I almost laughed out loud. I immediately ran to my father's study. The atmosphere inside was so heavy it was hard to breathe. My father held a pen and was crossing our assets out of the account book one by one. Every time he struck out another property, his face twitched. It was as though he wasn't crossing out possessions, but cutting flesh from his own body. The gold and silver are too heavy. We can't take them. The old porcelain will break too easily on the road. We'll have to leave it behind. And your mother's piano. My mother sat nearby crying silently, clutching her pearl necklace in both hands. What are we supposed to do? If I travel wearing a pearl necklace and we run into bandits, they'll probably kill us on the spot. Click. I pushed open the door and immediately locked it behind me. My father looked at me with reddened eyes and forced a smile. Chun-chun, you're still awake? I'm just calculating. If we abandon all the heavy things and exchange what we can for something portable, Maybe we can still keep 20 gold coins. We don't have to abandon anything. I stepped forward and took his trembling hand. What if I told you we don't even have to leave behind a single needle? Would you believe me? My father stared at me. Silly boy. We're fleeing for our lives. There are pieces of furniture here that weigh thousands of pounds. Are you planning to make your father carry them? You won't have to carry anything. I placed my hand on the inkstone my father treasured most, sitting on the desk. The next second, the inkstone vanished into thin air. Crash! The teacup in my mother's hand fell straight to the floor. Scalding tea splashed over her leg, but she didn't even react. She stared blankly at the empty spot on the desk. Heavens above! What kind of magic is this? My father's reaction was even more dramatic. This powerful businessman who had dominated the commercial world for decades shot out of his chair, stumbled several steps backward, and slammed into a cabinet. What is this? I explained calmly. It's the opportunity that Taoist priest left our family all those years ago. I have a secret space. I can put anything inside it, not just the things in this room. If the conditions are right, I can move everything in this entire mansion into it. I waved my hand. The inkstone reappeared exactly where it had been. My mother's knees gave out and she dropped to the floor. She pressed her palms together and bowed repeatedly toward the empty air. Thank heavens! All the good we've done has finally come back to us. Then she suddenly added, my pearl necklace is saved. I nearly burst out laughing. My father, at least, was a man who had seen the world. His legs were still shaking, but his mind was already racing. He grabbed my shoulders hard. Chun, you're saying no matter how large something is, you can put it inside? I nodded. There's enough room to store food for our family for generations. My father let out a long breath. The face that had been full of pain a minute earlier instantly came back to life. Even his back straightened again. Good. This is perfect. He looked again at the room full of antiques and valuable furniture. A moment ago, all of it had been a burden. Now, it was capital for our future. I had my father sit down. Dad, we're changing the plan. We keep selling the businesses and properties publicly, but what we're really selling are the land deeds and the right to operate the businesses. All the grain, clothes, medicine, and valuables in this house go into my space. And not just what's here. On the way to the northeast, every time we pass a market, grain shop, or pharmacy, we buy as much as our cash can afford. We're not going to the countryside just to hide. We're going there to rebuild our lives. My father's blood immediately started pumping, but he was an old hand at this kind of thing, and he quickly spotted a problem. He glanced toward the window and lowered his voice. Chun, your idea is right, but we still have dozens of servants in this house. That's a lot of eyes watching us. If the furniture suddenly starts disappearing, within half an hour the entire city will be saying our house is haunted. Then the military will be here immediately. I nodded. That really was something I had overlooked. I was still thinking in terms of the privacy a modern family had in my previous life. In a grand household in this era, servants were everywhere. There were almost no true secrets, but a crafty gleam appeared in my father's eyes. He walked to the bookcase and pressed a hidden button. Click. The entire row of shelves slid backward. A secret passage appeared in the wall. Follow me. My father picked up a kerosene lamp and went inside. My mother stayed outside the study, pretending to sew so she could stop anyone from coming in. The passage sloped steadily downward. At last, it opened into a huge basement. My father pushed open a heavy stone door. The instant the kerosene light shone inside, I forgot to breathe. There was no dust. Instead, row after row of enormous sandalwood chests filled the room. Each chest had a label. Gold 50 bars. Silver dollars 2,000 coins. Penicillin 1 crate. In the farthest corner sat a black case. There were English words on it. My father stared at the case and lowered his voice. I brought this back from overseas many years ago. I originally planned to leave it for the next generation. He opened the lid. The cold, distinct smell of metal hit me. The lamplight fell inside. Pistols, rifles, and box after box of ammunition were arranged neatly within. I secretly held onto these years ago. I thought they might save our lives someday if we ran into bandits. Now they'll finally be useful. My heart pounded. My father waved a hand. Put them away. The Northeast isn't peaceful. If we have these, at least we'll have some protection. With a thought, the entire case of weapons vanished into my space. By the time we came back through the underground passage, dawn was almost breaking. My mother's eyes were red when she saw us. You're finally back. I was terrified out here. I kept thinking someone would suddenly walk in. My father reassured her. Don't worry. It's all taken care of. Then he looked at me again. The building next door still holds the real jewelry passed down from our ancestors. Let's go. We're not leaving them a single piece of evidence. Using the thick early morning fog as cover, we quietly entered the treasure building. My father was completely in his element now. He gave directions, while I touched each item and sent it into my space. In my eyes, those objects weren't antiques anymore. They were simply data waiting to be copied into my super refrigerator. In less than half an hour, the treasure house that had once made the entire city jealous was completely empty. All we left behind were a few heavy, broken-down chairs. My father dusted off his hands and breathed out in relief. Now forget an ordinary investigator. Even if the highest official in the city came here, all he'd see is a poor family that's already gone bankrupt. Seeing that smug, fox-like expression on his face, I nearly laughed. That's the confidence you get from knowing your pockets are full, even if everything in those pockets was now stored in another world. Back in my room, I locked the door and entered the space again. The goods were safely inside. Next, I needed to test the space's other functions. I brought in a bowl of chicken soup fresh from the kitchen and placed it in the warehouse. Then I put a glass of ice-cold lemonade on a garden table outside. Half an hour later, I went back in. The chicken soup in the warehouse was still piping hot. Steam was still rising from it. That meant time in the warehouse area was completely frozen. Nothing stored there would ever spoil. But the ice in the lemonade out in the garden had already melted. A flower beside it had even opened a little farther. That meant time in the garden not only moved, it might actually move faster than in the real world. My eyes lit up. If I grew vegetables and raised chickens here, wouldn't they mature incredibly fast? Then we'd never have to worry about running out of food. I walked to the pond. The water was crystal clear and sweet. I brought 2 goldfish in from the fish tank in the real world and released them into the pond. The moment they hit the water, they began darting around energetically, looking even livelier than they had outside. So plants and animals really could live and grow here. The greatest surprise, though, came from the old well. I drew up a bucket of water and washed my face. The instant the water touched my skin, every trace of exhaustion disappeared. Even the little puncture wound on my finger from a few days earlier vanished rapidly. This wasn't ordinary well water at all. It was practically a healing potion. I looked at my refreshed reflection and couldn't help smiling. If I could have sold this stuff in my previous life, I probably could have become the richest man in the world. For the next 2 days, everything in the household appeared normal on the surface. The accountants kept working as usual. The servants went out to buy groceries as usual. Outside, marching crowds passed again and again, shouting slogans against the wealthy. Everyone inside the mansion lived in fear day after day. On the 3rd morning, I wasn't awakened by an alarm clock. I was awakened by the smell of roasting meat. I climbed out of bed and stepped into the corridor. The air was full of roasted meat and freshly cooked breads and dumplings. My brain immediately started running like a computer. I began calculating just how much food I could pack into the space this time. Son, why are you up so early? My mother, Guanwanli, came over. There was still tension between her brows. There are too many people outside. All kinds of people. I'm afraid someone might use the free banquet as an excuse to slip inside and investigate us. I took her hand. Mom, I just came out to see how the food preparations were going. My gaze shifted to the mountain of ingredients piled nearby. Slaughtered sheep and chickens. Live fish thrashing in baskets. Sacks of white flour and rice stacked like walls. In an era when prices were rising by the day, this grain was no different from a gold mine. Anyone who saw it might become greedy. Where's Dad? Putting on a performance in the banquet hall. My mother sighed, though she looked as if she were trying not to laugh. Just like you arranged. He's crying poverty in front of all his old friends. He's telling everyone that paying for your medical treatment has completely emptied our safe. He says this 3-day banquet is just the Liu family's last desperate attempt to preserve a little dignity. In my head, I gave Dad a huge thumbs up. With acting like that, the man could have won an Oscar in my previous life. Come on, Mom, let's go to the kitchen. The main kitchen looked more like a factory. Everyone was running non-stop. Madam, young master, the head cook wiped sweat from his face. The meat we got today is excellent. The balance of fat and lean is perfect. Just smelling it could tempt an immortal down from heaven. I put on the smile expected of the pampered young master of a rich household. Thank you for all your hard work. but my attention had already landed on more than 20 large insulated containers packed along one side. Are those going out to the guests? Yes. Young master, the first group of guests is already seated. I gave my mother a look. She understood immediately. After taking a deep breath, she instantly resumed the commanding bearing of the lady of a great house and deliberately raised her voice so the entire kitchen could hear. Chef, the young master and I had several large insulated containers placed in the room next door. From now on, set aside a generous portion from every pot of cooked food, meat, and soup and put it in those containers first. We're going to send it to the orphanage in the city. Consider it a way of earning blessings for my son. The cook immediately exclaimed, Madam, you truly have the heart of a bodhisattva. Naturally, no servant dared question a request from a family like ours. So platter after platter of steaming roast meat, fried fish, and cooked dishes was carried into the next room. Our loyal servant, Aisho, stood guard at the door like a soldier. The moment he saw me, he nodded. Young master, the large containers are ready. Just as you ordered. I went inside and locked the door. Dozens of large containers stood neatly arranged around the room. My father had spent the last 2 nights bringing them over from our own shops. This was our real secret operation. I placed a hand on one steaming hot container and quickly calculated in my head. Take the best meat first. Only store flour-based foods fresh from the steamer or oven. Only the cleanest, highest quality rice. And everything in the space had to be organized by category. Otherwise, trying to find anything later would drive me insane. I closed my eyes. Store it. Whoosh. More than a dozen containers of steaming meat, broth, and cooked dishes vanished at once. I felt only a slight pressure in my head. I could keep going. I turned and stored the freshly steamed white flour buns, cornmeal foods, and everything else as well. Batch after batch of food disappeared. At that moment, my mother carefully pushed the door open. Son, is this enough? Her face had gone pale with nerves and her palms were soaked in sweat. We were moving our own belongings inside our own home. Yet she looked as though she were stealing in front of the entire household staff. The thrill of it had her heart racing like she was on a roller coaster. I remained calm. Mom, the game has only just started. We're nowhere near done. The grain Dad received in exchange for selling those businesses hasn't all been delivered to the warehouses yet. Over these 3 days, we don't just need to use the banquet to store cooked food. We have to clear out all the raw grain too, and the valuable plants and rare livestock on the estate. I'm not leaving those people so much as a single hair. After saying that, I headed to the huge underground grain cellar behind the mansion. It held several thousand kilograms of flour, rice, cooking oil, and fine liquor that had been stored for years. I was moving it into the space container by container. Then, at that exact moment, the screech of brakes suddenly came from outside the main gate. A black military jeep stopped at the entrance. The door opened. A middle-aged man stepped out. He wore a dark blue long gown and a red armband marking him as a member of the committee. His eyes were sharp and cold. One look told me he was calculating and ruthless. He glanced at the crowd eating at the free banquet by the gate. Then he looked up at the Liu family's gold-lettered signboard. A cold smile slowly crept across his face. That old fox Louis Han really is cunning. At a time like this, he still dares to hold a free banquet on this scale. Is he showing off his power? Or is he trying to tell everyone he has more money than he knows what to do with? A broad-shouldered man behind him stepped closer and lowered his voice. Officer Zhang, should we go in now? I heard the banquet is supposed to last 3 days. I suspect the old man is using the crowds as cover to secretly move his assets out. There's something else strange too. That son of his, who's been mentally impaired for 10 years, supposedly became completely normal overnight. A sharp gleam flashed in Officer Zhang's eyes. Oh? Now that's interesting. Come on, let's go inside and congratulate Boss Liu. Meanwhile, I had just stored the last jar of aged liquor from the basement inside my space. Suddenly, a powerful sense of danger rose inside me for no apparent reason. I immediately left the space. Aisho, go watch the front hall right now. Remember, no matter what happens, don't let anyone realize something is wrong. Aisho's face went pale. He nodded, turned, and ran. I braced myself against the wall, breathing hard. Moving too many heavy objects at once had nearly drained my mental strength. My head hurt as though someone were driving needles into it over and over. My vision was starting to blur. Even my hands were trembling. I quickly pulled a small glass bottle from my pocket. It contained water I had drawn from the well in my space the night before. I tipped my head back and drank it all at once. The well water went down. Every trace of exhaustion vanished instantly. But just then, shouting and the sound of things being smashed came from the front hall. Search the place. Search every single corner. I don't believe the Liu family's safe is really empty. Then Officer Zhang's mocking voice drifted in. Well, Boss Liu, such a happy occasion in the family. And you didn't even invite an old friend like me. What? Do I really mean so little to you? My father, Liu Yihan, stood in the center of the hall. The moment he heard that voice, his expression darkened, but he still clasped his hands politely and forced a smile. Officer Zhang, I didn't realize it was you. His mouth was smiling, but he couldn't hide the anger in his eyes. My son has only just recovered. He can't handle too much noise yet. So we only invited a few close relatives inside the house. Since you're here, Officer Zhang, why not sit down and have a couple of cups of our cheap wine? No need. Officer Zhang's sharp eyes swept constantly around the hall, searching for valuables. At last, his gaze stopped on the row of completely empty cabinets along the wall. When he saw there was nothing inside, the corner of his mouth visibly lifted. Looks like the old man's house really is empty. The Liu family really has gone bankrupt. They might not even have enough money left to pay for this 3-day banquet. He deliberately said, I heard your son's illness was rather unusual. Boss Liu, you wouldn't be using your son's sickness as an excuse to secretly move your assets somewhere else, would you? The hall went silent instantly. Everyone began whispering among themselves. In this era, being accused of hiding assets or preparing to flee was no small matter. My father exploded in anger. Smack! He slammed a hand down on the table. The teacups shook right off and hit the floor. John, shut that filthy mouth of yours. You're making vicious accusations with no proof. Officer Zhang sneered. Whether it's true or not, all I have to do is take a look at that precious son of yours. Don't I? He gave a look to the men behind him. 2 burly men rolled up their sleeves, preparing to force their way into the rear courtyard. Just then, a violent fit of coughing came from behind the curtain. Leaning on Aisho's shoulder, I staggered out. I looked so weak that I seemed ready to collapse and die at any second. Dad, don't get angry. My voice was faint and breathless, but my eyes secretly swept Officer Zhang from head to toe. Well, look at this. So this is the Liu family's precious young master? Officer Zhang narrowed his eyes and walked toward me one step at a time. Uncle Zhang. I immediately covered my mouth with a handkerchief and let my body sway. My health is already ruined. Dad just told me he's planning to take me somewhere else to find a doctor. By the time they finish treating me, whatever little money our family has left will probably be gone too. I was crying poverty out loud, but secretly, I gave the old steward a look. The old steward was experienced too. He understood in a second. At that exact moment, 2 servants happened to be carrying an enormous wooden crate through the hall. It looked unusually heavy, as if they were about to load it onto a vehicle. Whoa! The old steward suddenly slipped. It looked completely accidental. His leg happened to knock against the ankle of one of the servants. Both men lost their balance at the same time. Boom! The huge wooden crate slammed onto the floor. Crack! The sound of large amounts of porcelain shattering came from inside. The lid burst open. Fragments of expensive-looking blue and pink antique porcelain spilled across the hall. Even from the glaze alone, anyone could tell the pieces had once looked extremely valuable. My family's ancestral porcelain. My father suddenly let out a heart-wrenching wail. If you didn't know better, you'd have thought his own father had just died. He threw himself to the floor and picked up a broken shard. His hands trembled non-stop, yet behind that grief-stricken expression, he secretly glanced at Officer Zhang. Officer Zhang walked over. Truthfully, he couldn't tell the genuine pieces from the fakes either. But after looking at the porcelain's finish and seeing my father's expression of total devastation, as though generations of family treasure had just been destroyed, he believed the performance almost completely. With acting like that, even a best actor at a film festival in my previous life might have struggled to match him. Boss Liu. This. Officer Zhang's suspicions had already faded. In their place came pure, delighted schadenfreude. Serves you right. That's what you get for spending all those years flaunting your wealth. Now you've finally gotten what's coming to you, haven't you? I gripped the doorframe. My eyes filled with tears. My voice carried all the despair of a family that had fallen from wealth into ruin. John, are you satisfied now? My father has already sold all our land to pay for my treatment. We were planning to sell this ancestral porcelain too, just to get enough money to keep living. Now it's gone. All of it is broken. I pointed at the fragments covering the floor, my voice trembling. Those weren't just a few bowls that shattered. That was our family's last hope of surviving. My father sat on the floor, beating his chest and stamping his feet in grief. But in the middle of all that crying, he quietly slipped one of the more intact shards into his sleeve. We could still use it again later. Seriously, Dad deserved an Oscar for this performance. Officer Zhang could barely hide the smile on his face. A crate of antiques like that would have been worth at least $1,000 silver. The Liu family had apparently fallen so far that they needed to sell ancestral porcelain just to pay for their son's treatment. Clearly, they hadn't been secretly transferring assets after all. What was there left to investigate in a penniless household? Since the young master's condition is this serious, I won't disturb you any longer. Before leaving, he added with fake sympathy, Boss Liu, what's done is done. Try to take care of yourself. With that, he strode away with his men. He didn't even look back. The pleasure he took in our supposed misfortune was written all over his face. Bang! The main door closed. My father, who had been collapsed on the floor beating his chest and sobbing a second earlier, sprang to his feet like a coiled spring. No aching back, no sore legs. He moved more nimbly than a young man. He brushed the dust from his trouser legs. Then he pulled the antique shard out of his sleeve. A sly, fox-like grin spread across his face. That idiot. He really took these reproductions for the real thing. These broken pieces were prepared for this performance in the first place. Tomorrow I'll have someone glue them back together. Maybe next time we can use them to fool another idiot. I took a warm towel from Aisho and wiped off the sickly makeup I had deliberately put on my face. Smiling, I said to my father, Dad, that's what you call a sunk cost. That man had to see our complete bankruptcy with his own eyes before he'd feel safe. Without this show, there's no way he would have let us go so easily. My father immediately ordered the steward, clean up the floor. That was just a performance for Zhang. Now the real show begins. Over the next 2 days, we spread the news throughout the city. The Liu family had gone completely bankrupt paying for their son's medical treatment. Prime storefronts in the center of the city. 100 mu of fertile farmland outside town. Even shares in our largest company. Everything was being sold cheap, for only half its original value. But payment came with conditions. We accepted only genuine gold coins, small gold bars, old silver dollars, yuan shirkai silver dollars, or grain, cotton, and cloth. The wealthy merchants who had coveted our family's holdings for years descended like vultures. Boss Liu, you wouldn't sell this shop for 2,000 silver dollars before. You're selling it for 1,500 today? I'll take it. Here's the money. My father pretended to cry in anguish as he signed the contracts with trembling hands. He looked as though he were cutting pieces of flesh from his own body. Inside, though, he was probably cursing them with delight. Idiots. You're fighting over my trash as if it's gold. The buyers were even happier. They thought they'd stumbled into the bargain of a lifetime. Behind my father's back, they laughed at him. Boss Liu has gone insane over that son of his. He's dumping assets this valuable for practically nothing. They had no idea. The moment they left, I moved every gold coin, silver dollar, and shipment of supplies we had received straight into my space. Ding! 10 crates of gold coins stored. Ding! 2,000 kilograms of high-quality flour stored. Ding! 500 kilograms of high-quality cotton stored. My space was rapidly becoming a mobile bank combined with a strategic supply warehouse. At last, the 3-day banquet and our frantic buying spree came to an end. On the final evening, we gathered the more than 30 servants in the household together. We couldn't take them with us. It would be dangerous for us, and just as dangerous for them. My mother's eyes were red. She had prepared an envelope for every servant. Inside was not only the wages they were owed, but enough money for each of them to live securely in the city for a long time. Madam, we don't want to leave you. Many of the servants burst into tears on the spot. My father turned his back and wiped away his own tears. Go, all of you. Keep yourselves safe too. Start your lives over. After the last servant left, the entire mansion fell completely silent. A home that had once been filled with voices at every hour suddenly felt like a tomb. I walked to the center of the courtyard. I reached for the power of the space. My parents stood nearby. We looked at one another. They nodded. We were ready. I spread my arms. I extended my awareness throughout the entire house. Store it. The next instant, every valuable piece of furniture, every carving, every porcelain piece, every decoration, every article of clothing, Every household item. Even anything that could be dismantled and taken away. One object after another vanished into thin air. Within just a few minutes, the Liu family mansion, once the most luxurious home in the entire city, had become nothing but a cold, empty shell. Now we could finally leave without anything holding us back. My father carried two old, half-collapsed leather suitcases. Of course, those were part of the act too. He pulled the brim of his hat low. The three of us quietly slipped out through the back gate. The street was quiet. We found the most ordinary, forgettable taxi we could. We had only one destination, the train station. The moment we arrived, the sight in front of me made my scalp tighten. Steam, coal smoke, shouting, crushing crowds. A green, metal-skinned train stood there like a steel beast, its whistle screaming again and again, carrying our entire fortune and our very lives with us. The three of us boarded the northbound train. I looked out through the window. I took one last look at Suzhou as it slowly receded behind us, and silently said, "Goodbye. Starting today, a new life, a new war." But I had no idea that in the darkest corner of the platform, an officer was holding a photograph of our family and staring coldly at the departing train. His eyes were colder than ice. A train station in 1950 felt like a place where hope and disaster had been mixed together. The three of us squeezed through the crowd as if we'd been shoved into a human meat grinder. We deliberately bought hard seat tickets. Anything better would have made us stand out. "Make way!" A muscular man carrying a huge bundle on his shoulder shoved past me. The smell of sweat and dust hit me full in the face. It nearly knocked me out. "Son, stay close to me." My father held a suitcase in one hand and shielded my mother with the other. Inside the train car was even worse. There was almost nowhere to put your feet. Some people sat under the seats. Some slept on the luggage racks. Others packed themselves into the aisle. We were sardines in a can. Sweat, smoke, and cheap tobacco blended together into a smell that made my head spin. I held my breath. This was the real 1950s. No high-speed rail, no luxury seats, just a rattling metal train clanking its way forward, drawing on decades of experience dealing with people. My father somehow forced his way through the crowd to the window and secured 3 seats for us. The moment we sat down, a middle-aged woman across from us, cracking sunflower seeds between her teeth, leaned over. "Well, look at you. The way you're dressed and carry yourselves. You don't look like ordinary people. Where are you headed?" My heart tightened immediately. In this era, one of the most dangerous things in the world was casual conversation with a stranger. One careless sentence could get you labeled a class enemy. My mother's entire body stiffened. She nervously gripped the hem of her clothes. I gently pressed my hand over hers. Then I answered in the plain, local manner of speech we'd practiced. "Auntie, we're going to stay with relatives. My father used to run a little business. He lost everything last year. And we had to sell the house too. We heard there's more food up north. So we're going there to find a way to survive. My uncle is in the army. He's the one who told us to come." As I spoke, I pulled a handkerchief from an old cloth bag. The emblem of the People's Liberation Army was printed on it. Of course, it was a prop I had prepared in advance. The moment the woman heard we had a relative in the military, her attitude changed. She didn't dare keep asking questions. She gave an awkward little smile and turned to talk to someone else. My father looked at me. His eyes were full of pride. The train continued north. The houses and ponds of Jiangnan slowly disappeared outside the window. They were replaced by land that grew drier and more barren with every mile. The 3-day, 2-night trip felt like torture. But during that time, I also became the best quartermaster in the entire train car. Late each night, once the car was filled with snoring, I used my coat as cover and secretly pulled boiled eggs, spicy beef, and hot milk in a thermos out of my space. "Dad, Mom, eat quickly. Don't let anyone see." I pushed a piece of beef into my father's mouth. His whole expression relaxed at once. The train around us might have been old, filthy, and overcrowded, but thanks to my space, our family could still eat like wealthy landowners. Louis Han chewed his beef while the train shook so hard it felt like his neck might come apart, yet his face was full of satisfaction. "Son, you eat too." My mother looked at me tenderly. I immediately waved her off. "I'm fine. A little while ago, I pretended I was going to the bathroom, then secretly ate an entire roast chicken and drank half a cup of water from the well in my space." The farther north the train traveled, the more completely the world outside changed. The humid, heavy air disappeared. The ground became hard and dry. The cold wind stung when it hit your face. The wind up north really cuts right through you. Worry appeared on my father's face. I immediately pulled 3 sets of clothes I had prepared in advance from our bag. They weren't silk robes. They were ordinary padded cotton clothes in dark brown and dark blue, made of coarse cloth. They looked thoroughly rural, but the inside was actually very comfortable. Dad, Mom, change into these. Once we get there, we can't look rich anymore. We have to look like a poor family wandering from relative to relative just trying to fill our stomachs. These clothes hide dirt, stand up to wear, and won't attract attention. After we changed, my father looked like a completely different man. The wealthy businessman who had once sat in a Suzhou mansion surrounded by servants and followers was gone. In his place was a beaten-down middle-aged man driven to the end of his rope, heading somewhere far away just to scrape out a living. My mother pinned up her hair as well. She put on an ordinary blue blouse made from coarse cloth. The clothes were plain, but somehow her face held a calmness I had never seen before. Just then, a sudden disturbance broke out in the train car. A uniformed inspector entered holding a notebook. His eyes kept sweeping over the passenger's luggage. My heart jumped into my throat. I tightened my grip on the letter of introduction we had prepared long ago. The inspector reached our seats. He stared at my father's old leather suitcase. It was as if he wanted to tear it open and find gold inside. Papers. His voice was cold. I immediately handed him the letter of introduction. It bore a seal from the People's Liberation Army. I deliberately put on an innocent expression. Uncle, my mother's brother is in the army. We're going to stay with him. The inspector looked at the letter. Sure enough, his attitude changed immediately. He even managed a faint smile. Without asking another question, he moved on. We'd passed. All 3 of us let out a breath at the same time. After endless jolting and delays, the train finally pulled into a major station. 3 large characters were written on the station sign. Harbin. The doors opened. A dry, bone-cutting wind mixed with coal smoke rushed straight into the carriage. It was completely different from Suzhou's damp winter cold. This was true northern cold, the kind that stabbed into you. Let's go. My father picked up the suitcase. He deliberately hunched his back and slipped once again into the role of a ruined poor man. Even his voice became rougher and more rustic. Come on, wife. Hurry up. Let's go find that relative. Dad, wait. I grabbed his sleeve. That suitcase was already the oldest one my father owned, but it was still genuine leather. It even had brass guards on the corners. Anyone who knew quality would take one look and realize it had once belonged to a wealthy man. My father's face showed a flash of reluctance. That suitcase had been with him for many years, but he understood almost immediately. I pulled a small piece of sandpaper from my pocket. Father and son crouched down beside the road and started grinding away at the suitcase's edges. Before long, the leather case that had still looked expensive was badly scuffed, dirty, and worn. Perfect. I nodded. My father looked at me. His eyes seemed to say, Son, now we're really ready. I smiled. Dad, the real game is only beginning now. The moment we left Harbin Station, my father resumed the appearance of a destitute farmer. He found a railway worker who was smoking, bending slightly at the waist. He spoke with exaggerated politeness. Comrade, could I ask you something? How do we get to Li Family Village? The worker took a long drag from his cigarette. Li Family Village? There are 8 or 10 villages with that name around here. Which one are you looking for? My father's heart sank. All he knew was that we had an ancestral relative named Li Shui who served as a village cadre in some place called Li Family Village, but he had no idea which part of the area it was in. Still, my father didn't panic. He immediately continued the act. There's a man in charge in the village named Li Shui. We're going there to stay with him. Disaster hit our family, and we have nowhere else to go. The railway worker thought for a moment. Then he pointed east. Oh, you mean the Li Family Village near Mauer Mountain? East of the city? That village has been there a long time. Head out of the city and keep going east. My father immediately pulled out an old cigarette and offered it to him respectfully. Thank you, comrade. Thank you very much. Outside the station was a completely different world. Horse carts, bicycles, peddlers carrying goods on shoulder poles. Dust and shouted sales pitches were everywhere. We slowly made our way to an area where carts and draft animals gathered. My father had my mother and me wait at a tea stall while he went to bargain with the drivers. Mom, look how hard Dad is working. I gently held my mother's hand. Tears were already gathering in Guan Wanli's eyes. All his life in Suzhou, Your father sat in cushioned chairs and negotiated business deals. When has he ever had to humble himself like this just to get a ride? I looked at her seriously. Mom, it's only temporary. Once we establish ourselves here, I promise I'll give you a life even better than the one you had in Suzhou. Someday, everything we're suffering today will only be a memory. Maybe the confidence in my eyes was strong enough to convince her. The fear on my mother's face slowly faded. Before long, my father returned with a man driving a donkey cart. Once they agreed on a price, we climbed aboard. The cart bed was covered with dry straw. It scratched at us, but it was 100 times better than walking. As the driver urged the donkey forward, he asked, "You folks came from the south?" My father continued with the story we'd prepared in advance. That's right. Disaster hit our family. The business lost everything. We had no choice but to come stay with distant relatives and find enough work to eat. The sun gradually sank toward the horizon. At last, a cluster of houses appeared in the distance. Cooking smoke rose from the chimneys. The driver suddenly pulled on the reins. "We're here. This is Lee Family Village. I can't take you any farther. The village has strict rules. Outsiders aren't allowed to drive their carts in whenever they like." He dropped us off and left. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance, but another sound mixed in with the barking made every hair on my body stand up. Someone was shouting, "Hold that kid down. Don't let that guy from the south get away." My father's hand froze around the handle of his suitcase. He looked at my mother and me. Strangely, there was no panic on his face, only the grim calm of a man who knew there was no retreat. "Let's go," he spoke quietly. "There's no turning back now. Whatever happens, we have to get an identity and a place to stay here." The three of us entered the dim lane leading into Lee Family Village. It felt as though we were carrying our lives in our own hands. I couldn't help thinking, what kind of relatives were these? Why had we barely reached the village entrance before hearing someone shout about catching the man from the south? The village road was narrow and dark. All along the way, villagers watched us with wary eyes. To them, we were obviously strangers. At last, we reached a house with a red flag hanging outside. My father, Louis Han, took a deep breath. He brushed the dust from his clothes. Then he gave me a look. At that moment, our entire family's fate rested behind that door. "Come on, son. Whatever is meant to come, we can't avoid it." My father pushed open the door. Inside was an extremely plain room. 4 or 5 men sat around a table eating. The only food on the table was dark, coarse-grained steamed cornbread. Beside it sat a basin of vegetable soup so thin you could almost see your reflection in it. My father spoke carefully. "Sorry to disturb you. Is Comrade Li Shui here?" A sturdy man stood up and wiped his mouth. "Who are you? What do you want with him this late at night?" My father immediately pulled a bundle wrapped in blue cloth from inside his clothes. It was our family genealogy book. We had prepared it well in advance. "My name is Louis Han. I came from Suzhou. My grandfather was named Lin Dekhang. I was told that he and Li Shui from your village were first cousins." The room suddenly fell silent. Everyone put down their chopsticks. They stared at us. It felt as if some secret was about to be uncovered. A man sitting at the corner of the table slowly stood up. He wore an old Zhongshan suit. He looked much steadier and more composed than the others. He walked over and took the genealogy book. Reading the room, I quickly turned up the nearby kerosene lamp to give him more light. His eyes settled on the names Lin Dekhang and Li Shui. He remained silent for a long time. Then he said, "I'm Li Shui. My father's name was Li Dashun. He did have a cousin who went south to do business many years ago. By the family relationship shown here, you should call me cousin uncle." My father's eyes instantly turned red. He lowered his head at once. "Uncle, I've finally found you." His voice was full of grief and relief. The performance was so convincing that even I almost believed he'd spent years desperately searching for this long-lost uncle. Li Shui waved to the other men. "You all go on. I need to speak with them for a while." Soon, only Li Shui and the 3 of us remained in the courtyard. He motioned for us to sit. Without wasting time, he asked directly, "All right, tell me, what happened that made you come all the way here from Suzhou? People don't bring their wife and child thousands of miles unless something serious happened." My father sighed deeply. "Uncle, to tell you the truth, we're finished. We used to have a small grain shop in Suzhou. The war, combined with several bad years, destroyed the business. Later, I borrowed money from people in the area. The debt kept growing. Eventually, we had to sell the shop and the house. The creditors still came every day, practically threatening our lives. when there was nowhere else left to go. I remembered my grandfather saying we still had family in the north. We came here because we're trying to survive. Li Shui stared at my father without blinking. It was as though he were examining every tiny change in his expression. Then he suddenly asked, "What kind of business did you do before?" My father paused slightly. "We sold grain." Li Shui's voice instantly turned cold. "So you were capitalists?" The word capitalists dropped into the room, like a bolt of thunder striking directly over our heads. My father's face turned white as paper. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He understood better than anyone what it meant to be identified as a capitalist in this era. I could even feel his hand trembling. What were we supposed to do now? Would Li Shui turn us in? Or would family loyalty make him take us in? Was this Li Shui a friend or an enemy? My heart began beating faster and faster. I knew this might be the first true life or death test we'd faced since reaching the Northeast. "Uncle, please don't say that." My father hurriedly waved both hands. What kind of rich man was I? It was just a tiny shop. I was the owner, but I moved the sacks myself too. I only had 2 distant relatives helping out, compared with owners of large factories or big merchants doing business with foreigners. I was nothing more than a laborer. As he spoke, he even held out his hands. "Look, I've got calluses from working too." Li Shui glanced at his hands. He said nothing. If anything, his gaze grew even more penetrating. I secretly kicked my father in the ankle. With my eyes, I warned him, "That's enough. Push the act too far and it'll look fake." My father understood immediately. He quickly pulled his hands back and stood with his head lowered. He looked as though he would accept whatever judgment came. "Then what did you come to me for?" Li Shui continued. There was already a clear warning in his tone. "Let's make one thing clear first. Everyone in Li family village is a poor farmer. We don't support people who refuse to work, and we certainly don't welcome merchants who live by sucking the blood of others. All the village land has already been distributed. There's no extra land for outsiders like you." No. My father hurriedly shook his head. "We wouldn't dare ask for land. All we want is a quiet place to live. A roof over our heads to keep out the wind and rain would be enough. I still have strength. I can chop firewood. Farm, I can learn anything. My wife can sew. If anyone in the village tears their clothes, she can mend them. My son is old enough to help too. He can feed pigs, gather firewood, do small jobs like that. We won't burden the village. We won't eat a single grain of food without earning it." Li Shui didn't answer. Those sharp eyes remained fixed on us. My father had deliberately dressed in ragged clothes, but the bearing of a wealthy businessman, built over decades, couldn't be completely hidden by changing into coarse cloth. Li Shui had clearly realized that parts of my father's story might be true and parts might be false. Maybe our fall from fortune was real, but the situation was definitely not as simple as my father claimed. Under normal circumstances, people of uncertain background like us should have been reported immediately, but we had brought the family genealogy. We really were relatives from his own ancestral line. If he simply drove us away and the 3 of us died outside, how could he ever face his ancestors afterward? But if he took us in and later discovered we really were some kind of problematic big capitalist family, then, as the person in charge of the village, Li Shui would be dragged down with us. I kept my head lowered, but secretly watched his expression. His brows were drawn tight. That meant he was still hesitating. I needed to give him one more push. Just then, a woman's shrill voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Director Li, you absolutely can't let them stay. So many people at the village entrance saw them. Those 3 have soft hands and delicate skin. One look and you can tell they used to be rich. Something must have happened to them outside, and now they've run to our village to hide." My father's face turned deathly pale. My mother's knees went weak and she nearly fell. Li Shui's eyes instantly hardened too. Clearly, the woman's words had landed on exactly what he feared most, but I actually relaxed. This was the opportunity one wanted. Before my father could speak, I suddenly burst into tears and ran to Li Shui. "Grandpa Li, don't listen to her. We're really not rich people. We truly have nowhere else to go." I rushed to the door and opened the battered bag we'd brought with us. Inside were only a few dried sweet potatoes and some wild grains. There wasn't even a single grain of rice. Then I held my 2 small hands out in front of Li Shui. My skin was pale, but there were quite a few small cuts and scrapes on my hands. Of course, I had deliberately made some of them over the past few days. "Grandpa Li, look. I've worked with my hands too. I helped Dad carry things on the road, and I helped Mom gather firewood. I'm not some spoiled rich kid who can't do anything." This is all the food we have left in our bag. We haven't had a real full meal in 3 days. I dropped to my knees with a thud. I even made my body tremble slightly on purpose. Dad said you're the only family we have left to turn to. We don't need a comfortable life. We just want somewhere we can stay alive. I'll feed pigs if I have to. I'll gather firewood. I'll do anything. Please let us stay. My mother, Guan Wanli, knelt down too. Director Lee, please. Li Shui looked at the mother and son kneeling on the floor. Then he looked at the marks on my hands. Suddenly, he said, "Get up." His eyes returned to my father. He was still studying him, but there was clearly less suspicion now. "I saw the information you wrote in the genealogy book just now. Your handwriting is good." My father froze. He obviously didn't understand why Li Shui had suddenly brought that up, but my eyes immediately lit up. I knew what he meant. Sure enough, Li Shui continued. "The man who used to keep the village accounts broke his leg last month. Our books are a mess right now. If you truly want to stay, you can start by helping the village with the accounts. You'll only be paid half what an able-bodied laborer earns. As for somewhere for the 3 of you to live, there's an old wooden cabin at the foot of the mountain behind the village. It's been empty for years. It's in an isolated spot. It's far from the village, and almost no one goes there. If you're willing to clean and repair it yourselves, you can live there." He paused there. Then he looked seriously at all 3 of us. "But I have conditions. First, I will report your situation. We'll wait for the investigation from above. Second, during that time, work honestly. Don't cause trouble. Third, if I discover you're playing games with me, or your real identities are different from what you've told me, I'll personally be the first one to drive you out of this village." Andy Wong outside immediately became anxious. Clinging to the doorframe, she shouted, "Director Lee, you're really going to let them stay? What if they turn out to be some big wealthy family? You'll be implicated too." The voice outside wasn't very loud, but I heard every word clearly. She was right about one thing. All we'd obtained was temporary permission to stay. The villagers didn't truly trust us at all. From now on, every step would have to be taken with extreme caution. Li Shui turned around and barked, "What's all this yelling? Go home. All of you. Does my word mean nothing now?" It quickly fell quiet outside. And in my heart, I understood completely. This wasn't merely a test Li Shui was giving my father. It was also the first real step toward whether our family could put down roots in the Northeast. From this point on, we had truly entered the survival game of this era. My father was surprised too. He had assumed he'd have to work in the fields after we arrived. He never expected Li Shui to put him in charge of the accounts. And the place we'd be living was at the foot of the mountain, far from the village. That was unbelievably good news. What place could possibly be better for hiding our secrets than an isolated cabin far from the villagers' eyes? But my father didn't show the slightest trace of happiness. Instead, he bent at the waist with a deeply grateful expression. "Thank you, Uncle. Thank you so much for giving us a way to survive. You've saved our whole family." Li Shui waved a hand. His expression remained stern. "Don't thank me yet. I'm telling you this up front. If you want to stay, you follow the village rules. Understand?" "We understand. We understand. We'll do exactly what you say." My father kept nodding. Li Shui stood up. He picked up an old kerosene lamp from the corner and lit it. "Come on. It's already dark. The mountain path is hard to walk at night. I'll take you there." After walking for about 20 minutes, Li Shui stopped. He raised the kerosene lamp. "We're here. This is the place." I followed the light with my eyes. Between the trees, a small wooden cabin stood all by itself. Before we even went inside, I could smell dampness, rotting wood, and dust mixed together. This is where we're going to live?" My mother, Guan Wanli, stared at the cabin and couldn't even find words for a moment. My father's face fell too. We had all said we were prepared to endure hardship, but actually seeing this place still hit him hard. Li Shui took in every change in their expressions. His own face didn't change. If anything, he felt slightly more reassured, judging by their reactions. At least this part didn't look rehearsed. He explained, "An old hunter built this place years ago. He's been dead for a long time. The cabin has been empty for years too. There's only a heated earthen bed platform inside. Other than that, there's almost nothing. If you want to live here, you'll have to repair it yourselves. You'll need to gather your own firewood and water from around the mountain too." He handed the kerosene lamp to my father. "You can keep this. Tomorrow morning, I'll have someone from the village bring you a little food and some basic supplies." My father took the lamp. His hand trembled slightly. All right. Having a roof over our heads is already more than enough. Thank you, Uncle. Sorry to trouble you. Li Shui nodded. Before leaving, he reminded us. One more thing. Don't wander around at night. There are wolves in the mountains. If something really happens, light a fire in the direction of the village. If we see the flames, we'll come. With that, he turned and walked into the darkness. Soon, he disappeared among the trees. My mother finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Ihan, are we really sleeping here tonight? Her voice was already on the verge of tears. My father lifted the kerosene lamp and looked inside the rundown cabin. Wanli, don't be afraid. He tried to make his voice sound firm. It's only an old wooden cabin. We'll repair it little by little ourselves. When I was young and had just started working, I slept on piles of straw beside the docks. I survived those days too. No matter how bad this place is, it's better than sleeping out in the open. At least, we still have a roof over our heads. The moment he finished speaking, whoosh, a violent mountain wind suddenly swept through. The dry, rotted thatch on the roof rattled wildly, and then, a pile of dead leaves and dust dropped straight from the roof onto my father's head. Dust covered Luihan from head to toe. There was straw in his hair, dirt on his shoulders, and even a dead leaf from who knew how many years ago stuck to the tip of his nose. His line from a second earlier, "At least we still have a roof over our heads," instantly became painfully ironic. My mother and I both fell silent. My father fell silent too. The three of us looked at one another. In the end, my mother was the first to lose the battle. Pfft. She hurriedly covered her mouth. Too late. My father slowly turned his head. Wanli. Did you just laugh? No. I heard it. That was the wind. I finally couldn't hold it in either. Dad, that leaf on your head really suits you. His face darkened. You little brat. Still laughing? He raised a hand as if he were going to smack me. But halfway up, even he started laughing. The three of us stood inside that miserable cabin, with wind coming through the walls, rain able to leak through the roof, and a door that barely closed, and somehow we laughed for a full half-minute. But as the laughter faded, my mother's eyes turned red. She turned away and quietly wiped the corner of one eye. I knew what she was thinking. Only a few days earlier, she had been Madame Lu of the Great Lu Mansion in Suzhou, the woman who had someone hold an umbrella over her whenever she went out and servants place every dish before her at mealtimes. A single qipao in her wardrobe might have cost enough to feed an ordinary person for years. But now, all she had in front of her was a blackened heated bed platform, a table with one crippled leg, and a roof that looked as though the next strong gust might rip it away. My father clearly saw it too. He didn't give some grand speech. He simply walked over and gently pulled my mother into his arms. Wanli, I'm sorry you've had to suffer this. My mother's nose reddened. I'm not afraid of hardship. She looked at me, then at my father. I just suddenly feel like I'm dreaming. Our home is really gone. My father fell silent. I walked over and took both of their hands. Who says it's gone? They both looked at me. I pointed at the three of us. Dad is here. Mom is here. I'm here too. That means the Lu family is still here. That mansion in Suzhou was only a house. The three of us are the home. The cabin went completely quiet. Tears instantly rolled down my mother's face. My father's lips moved several times, but in the end he only gave my shoulder a hard pat. Good boy. You said that better than your old man ever could. I grinned. Of course. I'm the family's little master strategist. Remember? The redness that had just appeared in my father's eyes disappeared instantly. Get out of here. The mood finally lightened again. I looked at the darkness outside. After confirming that Li Shui was completely gone, I shut the door immediately. Then, I waved my hand. Dad. Mom. The act's over. Time for an upgrade. The next second. Whoosh. The soft bed from my space appeared directly in the middle of the cabin. Then came thick cotton quilts, pillows, tables and chairs, a kerosene stove, a copper kettle filled with hot water, even the tea set my mother had loved using back in Suzhou. One item after another appeared. My mother stared in disbelief. My father froze too. Then I brought out 3 bowls of beef noodles that were still steaming hot. Each even had a fried egg on top. Come on. The northeast branch of the Lu family is officially open for business. Let's eat first. My father stared at the beef noodles for a full 3 seconds. Then he sat down immediately. Son, give your father extra chili. My mother glared at him. You just got here and you already want to eat that spicy? Are you trying to kill yourself? My father already had his chopsticks in hand. I've pretended to be poor from Suzhou all the way to Harbin. If you don't let me eat one decent meal now, that's what's really going to kill me. I nearly burst out laughing. That night, the north wind howled outside. The battered cabin creaked wildly in the gusts. But inside, it was warm enough to make us sleepy. The three of us sat around the table eating beef noodles. My father ate 2 bowls. My mother claimed she had no appetite, but in the end she drank every last drop of broth. Before we went to sleep, I secretly added a little water from the well in my space to their cups. After so many days of non-stop travel, they never complained. But physically, both of them were already close to their limits. Sure enough, early the next morning, my father was the first to sit up on the heated bed. He rolled his shoulders, then twisted his waist. His expression grew stranger by the second. That's odd. Yesterday everything hurt like hell. Why doesn't anything hurt today? My mother touched her face. I feel unusually energetic too. I lay under the blankets and pretended to be dead asleep. Maybe the northern climate agrees with you. My father narrowed his eyes at me. I immediately closed mine. Don't ask questions. If anyone asked, the official answer was that northeast air worked miracles. From that day forward, our family truly began our life in Lee Family Village. My father went to the village every day to keep the accounts. At first, everyone watched him suspiciously, especially Auntie Wong. Whenever my father passed her door, she practically wanted to glue her eyes to him. Hey, Lou, you really only ran a little grain shop before? My father put on his most honest expression. Lost it all. Really? I lost everything. Then how do you do the accounts so fast? We were poor. I couldn't afford to lose a single cent, so I got good at it. Auntie Wong couldn't find a flaw, so she had no choice but to leave. What she didn't know was this. Who was Louis Han? Asking a man who had once managed enormous businesses to keep the accounts for one village was like asking a university professor to solve 1 + 1. On the 3rd day, my father found a problem. On the 5th day, he returned to the cabin with all the humor gone from his face. Son, we've got trouble. I immediately sat upright. What is it? My father pulled a ledger he had reorganized himself from inside his coat. Over the past year, quite a lot of the village's supplies have gone missing. Grain, coal, cotton cloth, even part of the money allocated from above to repair the irrigation canal. My mother's expression changed. Someone embezzled it? My father shook his head. Li Shui doesn't have the nerve for that. And on paper, every withdrawal has proper paperwork. He pointed to several names. The problem is right here. I looked down. Under several signatures acknowledging receipt, the same seal appeared every time. Zhang. My eyes narrowed instantly. There was no way this could be that much of a coincidence. Was there? My father lowered his voice. I asked Li Shui. Every time these supplies reach the town, someone surnamed Zhang handles all the forwarding. But what the village actually receives is, at best, 70% of what's shown in the books. The corner of my mouth slowly lifted. Officer Zhang. I hadn't even gone looking for you yet, and you've already put your face right in front of my hand. Even more interestingly, that very night, Li Shui suddenly came to see us. He didn't enter the cabin. He simply stood outside. His expression was grave. Louis Han, someone from above has come to investigate your family. My father's face changed sharply. My mother tensed too, but I asked one question. Who? Li Shui shook his head. I don't know. All I know is that he came from the city, and he's carrying photographs of the 3 of you. My heart skipped. Photographs. The train station. I instantly remembered the officer in the corner of the platform holding photographs of us when our train left Suzhou. So, he really had followed us here. My father lowered his voice. Is his surname Zhang? No. Li Shui answered immediately. His surname is Chen. He only asked where the 3 of you came from, and whether I'd noticed anything unusual about you lately. Chen? My mind raced. The next second, I suddenly smiled. My father frowned. You're smiling at a time like this? Dad, this may not be what we think. If this man's surname Chen really worked for Officer Zhang, there would be no reason for him to investigate quietly. What had Officer Zhang done back in Suzhou? He marched men directly into our house and searched it. That was his style. But this Officer Chen had followed us all this way without making a move. Even after reaching Lee Family Village, all he had done was ask questions. What did that mean? Maybe he wasn't investigating us at all. Maybe he was investigating the people following us. I immediately asked Li Shui. Grandpa Li, besides that man named Chen, Have any other outsiders come around lately? Li Shui paused. Then his expression changed. Yes. 2 came yesterday. They said they were here to buy mountain products. My father and I looked at each other at the same time. There they were. Officer Zhang's people. That night, we did nothing. The next day, my father went to keep the accounts as usual. My mother helped the village women mend clothes as usual. I even deliberately went to the village entrance to gather firewood. By afternoon, sure enough, Auntie Wang crept over looking mysterious. Little Lu, your family really doesn't have any money left? I put on an innocent face. No, we don't. Then why did I hear that your family has been digging around the foot of the mountain at night? Well, the fish was starting to bite. I deliberately let my expression change. Who told you that? Auntie Wang's eyes instantly lit up. So there really is something? No. I grabbed my bundle of firewood, turned, and ran. I ran faster and faster. I looked exactly like someone with a guilty conscience. That night, my father and I dug a pit behind the cabin. We deliberately left messy footprints around it. Then we placed an old wooden chest inside. Of course, there was no gold in the chest, only rocks, and several duplicate ledgers my father had reconstructed from the village's real accounts. Officer Zhang wanted to find the Lu family's money, didn't he? Fine. I'd prepared something for him. Now all that remained was to see whether he had the nerve to come take it. 3 days later, in the middle of the night, dogs started barking. I opened my eyes. My father woke at the exact same time. He lowered his voice. They're here. My mother looked nervous. I gently patted her hand. Mom, don't be afraid. This time, we're not the ones running. They're the ones in trouble. About 10 minutes later, torches suddenly appeared outside the cabin. Bang! The already flimsy wooden door was kicked straight open. Officer Zhang walked in. Same face. Same condescending smile. Only this time, he had 6 or 7 burly men with him. Boss Lu. Funny how life keeps bringing old acquaintances together. My father slowly sat up on the heated bed. His face first showed shock, then immediately turned fearful. Oh, Officer Zhang, what are you doing here? Acting. Still acting. I nearly applauded my father. Officer Zhang's grin grew even more smug. Did you really think that if you sold your Suzhou businesses cheap and fled to the northeast, nobody would know? Louis Han, where's your gold, your jewelry, and the fortune the Lu family accumulated over generations? My father's face went pale. It's all gone. Smack. Officer Zhang slammed a palm against the table. Bullshit. The Lu family spent decades building that fortune, and you expect me to believe it simply vanished? Search. The burly men immediately began turning everything upside down. There hadn't been much in the cabin to begin with. After searching for a long time, all they found were a few pieces of coarse clothing, several sacks of sweet potatoes, half a crock of cornmeal. Officer Zhang's face grew darker and darker, until one of his men came running in from behind the cabin. Found something. There's a freshly dug pit out back. Officer Zhang's eyes instantly lit up. My father's face went white in a flash. I deliberately shouted too. Don't dig there. That one shout worked better than if I had simply told them. There's gold inside. Officer Zhang burst out laughing. Finally, can't keep pretending. Dig. The wooden chest was quickly hauled out. Officer Zhang personally walked over. The greed in his eyes was almost spilling out. He crouched down. He lifted the lid. Then, his smile froze. Rocks. An entire chest full of rocks. What is this? He stared in disbelief. I answered quietly. For building a pigpen. The air went silent for 2 seconds. My father suddenly turned his head away. His shoulders began to shake. I knew why. He was trying not to laugh. Officer Zhang's face turned green. You tricked me? He kicked the chest over. Several ledgers fell out. Officer Zhang looked down. His whole body suddenly went rigid. Because on one of the open pages, his own name was written there in unmistakable characters. At that point, my father finally stopped pretending. He slowly stood up. Officer Zhang, what's the hurry? Aren't you going to take a look at those books? Officer Zhang snapped his head up. What do you mean? My father's spine slowly straightened. The ruined merchant who had shuffled around the village with his head bowed and a torn padded coat disappeared. In that moment, he became Boss Lu again, the man who had once sat in a grand Suzhou mansion and could decide the fate of several shops with a single sentence. The meaning is simple. Of the grain that passed through your hands on its way from town to Li family village, 30% disappeared over the course of a year. 20% of the coal disappeared. More than 40 bolts of cotton cloth disappeared. Even part of the money for repairing the irrigation canal disappeared. It just so happens I'm good with numbers. And it just so happens I had time on my hands. So I recalculated everything for you. A vicious look flashed in Officer Zhang's eyes. Nonsense. My father sneered. You know better than anyone whether it's nonsense. I added from the side. Uncle Zhang, don't get so worked up. High blood pressure isn't good for you. He whipped around to glare at me. You little bastard. It was you. At last. He understood. The bankruptcy show in Suzhou. The shattered porcelain. The cheap sale of our businesses. The critically ill son. All of it had been fake. The Liu family was never bankrupt. I smiled. Where's your proof? 3 words. Officer Zhang froze completely. I stepped forward. Haven't you been saying all along that we had gold? Where is it? Where's the jewelry? Where are the antiques? I spread my hands. Search. This cabin is only so big. You dug up the ground. You opened the chest. Did you find a single piece of gold? The muscles in Officer Zhang's face twitched. Of course he couldn't find anything. Forget 7 men. He could bring 700. He could turn over the entire mountain. He still wouldn't find it. Because the Liu family's real fortune wasn't even in this world. You, on the other hand. I glanced at the ledgers on the floor. You brought a group of men into a villager's home in the middle of the night, and just happened to uncover records showing problems and accounts connected to you. If word of this gets out, that might be a little difficult to explain, wouldn't it? Officer Zhang's face changed instantly. The next second, actual killing intent flashed in his eyes. Close the door. Several of his men turned at once. My mother's face went white. My father stepped forward to shield her. But I smiled. Officer Zhang, isn't it a little late to close the door now? The instant I finished speaking, more than a dozen torches suddenly lit up in the woods. Nobody move! A furious shout rang out. A moment later, Li Shui charged out with the village's able-bodied men, and walking at the very front, was someone I had seen before. I'd only seen him from a distance at the train station, but there was no chance I'd mistake him. He was the officer who had been holding photographs of our family. His surname was Chen. The instant Officer Zhang saw him, every trace of color drained from his face. Section Chief Chen? Section Chief Chen looked at him coldly. Zhang Youfu, I've been investigating you for more than 2 months, and now I've finally caught you in the act. Officer Zhang's lips trembled. No, that's not. Section Chief Chen, let me explain. I heard the Liu family had transferred its assets, so I came to investigate. Investigate? Section Chief Chen looked at the broken door that had been kicked in, then at the belongings scattered all over the floor. Where are your authorization papers? Who gave you permission to travel this far and conduct a private search with your own men? And one more thing. He bent down and picked up the ledgers. You can explain these missing supplies from Li family village while you're at it. Officer Zhang panicked completely. He suddenly pointed at my father. It's him. He's a major capitalist. His family used to have more gold than anyone could count. Arrest him. If you take him in and interrogate him, he'll confess. I almost laughed. Even now, he was still trying to drag us down with him. I walked up to Section Chief Chen. Uncle Chen, you followed us all the way here. I assume you've already investigated what happened back in Suzhou. He looked at me. For the first time, surprise appeared in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected me to realize he'd been following us. Then he nodded. I have. Before you left, every Liu family business and property that could be found in the records was sold through normal channels. The paperwork was complete. All required payments were made. The servants' wages were paid in full. As for the money you received from selling those assets, he glanced at Officer Zhang. A man's suspicions are not enough to criminalize the movement of lawfully owned private property. Officer Zhang opened his mouth several times. Not a single word came out. I nearly laughed aloud. What do you call that? You can search the entire world and still never find my warehouse. A secret space like mine was the ultimate cheat code against physical searches. Section Chief Chen continued. You, on the other hand, during our investigation in Suzhou, we already found 3 merchants from whom you demanded property in the name of an investigation. Now the Li family village accounts line up with the same pattern. Zhang Youfu, you're coming with us. Officer Zhang's knees went weak. No. Section Chief Chen, it's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. He even threw himself toward my father. Boss Liu, say something for me. We've known each other for years. His shamelessness almost made me laugh from sheer disbelief. You were the one who barged into the Lu home to search it. You were the one who gloated when you thought we'd gone bankrupt. You were the one who sent people to follow us all the way to the northeast. And now that you were in trouble, you wanted to talk about old friendship? My father looked at him. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he gave him an exceptionally sincere smile. Officer Jean, when my ancestral porcelain shattered, didn't you tell me to accept what had happened and take care of myself? Officer Zhang's face froze. My father patted him on the shoulder, then said each word clearly. Now, it's my turn to give you the same advice. Take care of yourself. I had no words. That was a finishing blow. Dad could hold a grudge for a very, very long time. By the time Officer Zhang was taken away, his whole body had gone limp. Auntie Wang and a crowd of villagers stood outside. The way they looked at us had completely changed. Before, they thought we were rich people hiding in the village to escape some kind of trouble. But now, my father had uncovered rotten accounts that no one in the village had noticed for an entire year. He had also helped recover a large amount of stolen supplies for them. The next day, Li Shui personally came to the cabin. He placed a stamped document in my father's hand. The investigation results are back. Your family can stay. My mother's eyes turned red immediately. My father held that thin piece of paper. His hands shook more than they ever had when he'd signed contracts worth tens of thousands of silver dollars. Uncle, Li Shui waved a hand. Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank yourself for not doing anything wrong. Then he looked at my father again. One more thing. You keep handling the village accounts. My father blinked. Still at half pay? Li Shui glared at him. What? Not enough for you? No. My father immediately shook his head. After Li Shui left, I finally burst out laughing. Dad, congratulations. The great businessman of Suzhou is now officially the accountant of Li Family Village. My father kicked at me. Get lost. But my mother laughed so hard tears came out. That night, for once, our family had a real celebration dinner. It wasn't some extravagant feast. I only took one chicken from the space, a little beef, and a few small side dishes we'd stored earlier. My mother cooked everything herself. My father handled the fire. I sat nearby peeling garlic. Before long, smoke had blackened my father's face. My mother shoved him aside in disgust. Do you even know how to tend a fire? Of course I do. It went out. The firewood is bad. No, you're just bad at this. Guan Wanli. You used to be a boss. Now you're an accountant. I sat to the side laughing until my stomach hurt. When the food was ready, my mother put a chicken leg in my bowl. My father immediately protested. What about me? How old are you? Our son saved us all the way to the northeast. Of course the chicken leg goes to him. My father looked at me. He didn't argue again. Instead, he put the other chicken leg into my bowl too. Eat. I paused. Dad? My father lowered his head and took a sip of liquor. His voice was quiet. Your father used to think. Having money. Having a mansion. Having shops. Making sure you and your mother could walk outside and have everyone look up to you. I thought that was what it meant to be capable. Only now do I understand. In the end, money can be lost. A house can be lost. A business can be lost too. But you can't lose your family. By the time he reached that point, his eyes were red. Chun, if it hadn't been for you this time, your mother and I. He didn't finish, and I didn't want him to. I raised my bowl. I tapped it gently against his cup of liquor. Dad, what's past is past. The three of us didn't lose a single person. My mother wiped away tears beside us. That's right, not one of us is missing. I looked at them. Suddenly, I felt a kind of satisfaction I couldn't put into words. In my previous life, I knew history. I knew the future. I knew where opportunities would appear. In this life, I also had a heaven-defying secret space. Inside it was gold, medicine, food, weapons, antiques, even enough supplies to feed our family for generations. But only at this moment did I truly understand. The most valuable things connected to that space weren't sitting on any of its shelves. The things worth the most were right in front of me. My father, my mother, and the fact that the three of us could still sit at the same table and eat together. In the days that followed, we truly began to become part of Li Family Village. My father used his skills to reorganize the village accounts, whose grain totals had been miscalculated, who owed work points, which supplies needed to be stockpiled early. He knew it all better than anyone. Eventually, people in the village even joked, with Accountant Lou's brain, it'd be a waste if he weren't keeping the books. My mother became one of the most popular people in the village too. She knew how to sew. She knew how to make southern-style snacks. And with small amounts of medicinal ingredients I secretly took from the space, she could make restorative soups for the elderly. Of course, we never brought out too much. In this era, suddenly producing a mountain of gold would be asking to die. The truly smart way to survive was never to show everyone how many cards you had hidden. It was to make sure they only ever saw the part you wanted them to see. As for me, I slowly began taking seeds out of my space. I secretly cleared a small plot of land at the foot of the mountain. I didn't dare use large amounts of the well water directly. I only mixed in a little each time. The result was that the next year, our corn grew noticeably taller than everyone else's, and the potatoes were enormous. One after another, my father squatted at the edge of the field, holding a potato almost as large as a human head. He was silent for a long time. "Son, don't you think this is a little excessive?" I fell silent too. Yeah, maybe we'd overdone it. In the end, my father and I dug up the biggest batch of potatoes in the middle of the night and stored them back in the space. We left only the ones that looked reasonably normal. What can I say? Even with a cheat ability, you still have to know how to keep the numbers under control. Several years passed. The hunter's cabin at the foot of the mountain, once on the verge of collapse, had changed completely. There was no grand mansion, no carved beams or painted rafters, only a few clean brick anterooms. There were chickens in the courtyard, a vegetable garden, and my mother's favorite osmanthus tree. That tree was one I had secretly stored away from our old home in Suzhou. The day I brought it back out, my mother stood beneath it and cried for a long time. My father teased her. "It's been so many years. You're still crying?" My mother glared at him. "What would you know?" My father kept pretending he didn't care. Then that night, he sat under the tree alone and drank half a pot of liquor. I didn't call him out on it. Later still, the times slowly moved forward. I knew the real opportunities were still ahead of us. Far ahead. But they would come. The Liu family's gold had not disappeared. Our foundation in business had not truly been severed. My space still held some of the most valuable things from that era. More importantly, my father never stopped learning during those years. Neither did I. All anyone else saw was an ordinary family living at the foot of a mountain. What no one knew was that we were waiting for the storm to pass, waiting for the doors of a new era to truly open. One evening, I stood on the hillside. In the distance stretched fields of golden crops. My father came back from the fields with a hoe over his shoulder. Over the years, the sun had darkened his skin considerably. His shoulders were no longer as straight as before, and yet he seemed more grounded than he ever had when he was boss Liu of Suzhou. My mother stood at the courtyard gate and shouted, "Ihan, Chun, dinner." My father turned to me. "You hear that? Your mother's calling us." I smiled. "Let's go." He took 2 steps, then suddenly stopped. "Son." "Yeah?" "You once said, as long as we're still standing, we can build another fortune from scratch. Does that still count?" I looked at him. Then I looked into the distance. The corner of my mouth slowly lifted. "Of course it counts, Dad. All we lost was the old Liu family. The real new Liu family hasn't even begun yet." My father froze for 2 seconds. Then he threw back his head and laughed. "Good. I'll be waiting." My mother planted her hands on her hips in the distance. Exasperated. "Are you two coming to eat or not?" "Coming." My father surrendered immediately. I followed behind him. The setting sun stretched the shadows of all 3 of us across the ground. In this life, I would never again let my parents die in the raging tide of that era. And I would never let anyone climb higher by stepping over the bones of the Liu family. The people who had laughed when the Liu family went bankrupt. The people who thought fleeing to the northeast meant we were finished forever. Even Officer Zhang, who had once stood in our front hall and gloated over the floor covered with shattered antiques. They would never know that the Liu family they believed had lost everything, had not truly lost a single piece of its real wealth. The gold was still there. The antiques were still there. The supplies were still there. Our connections and abilities were still there too. Most importantly, the 3 members of our family were all still here. I touched the warm white jade pendant against my chest. Inside the space, rows of shelves extended silently beyond the limits of sight. Gold, food, medicine, machines, seeds, and the accumulated foundation of generations of the Liu family. I smiled. For now, of course we'd keep a low profile. Farm, eat, stay with my parents, live well. As for later, When the era that truly belonged to me finally arrived, I would make everyone understand one thing. The Liu family had never fallen. We had simply left the stage early, moved to a different map, and waited for the right moment to start the game again.